Good to see you. Happy to see you and happy to have this defense ministers meeting here today and tomorrow in Brussels. Today, as you know, we will have the first opportunity to also welcome our partners from the Indo-Pacific, New Zealand, Australia, Japan and South Korea. And this is for the first time that they will participate in a defense ministerial meeting. The EU is also here today, and that's important because we really want to reach out and work closely together with all our partners. And the EU, as you know, is a very important partner. We will try to start a debate building on what we have done, for example, at the summit in Washington, of deepening that relationship and bringing it also forward in areas like innovation, how we can work together on industry production, how we can work together on fighting cybercrime, etc. And of course, hybrid threats. So all of this will be discussed, no doubt, this afternoon. Later today, I will have the honor to welcome President Volodymyr Zelensky here in this building. This will be my third opportunity to sit down with him after my visit to Kiev a couple of weeks ago, and last week meeting him in London together with Prime Minister Keir Starmer. We have been on the phone, so it's very good to have him again here visiting to talk about what is happening now in Ukraine, but also to update him on the considerable progress NATO is making on what we decided in Washington. The pledge, as you know, the 20.9 billion are now in the pocket. First half of this year, and we are in a good space on delivering the full 40 billion at the end of this year. I was on Monday in Wiesbaden at the command being set up and SETU, which will bring together so many aspects of our support for Ukraine in a coordinated manner. So I will update him on this. And of course on all the ongoing efforts to make sure that for the long haul, if necessary, we will keep supporting Ukraine. And that is our message to Putin. We are in this, if necessary, for the long haul. And obviously we want to be in a place where Zelensky and Ukraine, from a position of strength, is able to start talks with Russia. But till that moment comes, he can count on continuing support, and Putin cannot count on us letting go of that support. We will keep this going, and this is what we are all committed about. This was I hear consistently in all my talks in the alliance. I also welcome what the US has announced yesterday. They already, of course, pledged 8 billion. Very concretely yesterday, they pledged almost half $1 billion in air defense and other aid going into Ukraine. I welcome the Australian announcement yesterday about the tanks which will go to Ukraine. So this is all good news, and there were many other announcements. I will not go through the whole list, but these were a few big ones I would like to mention this morning. With that, I'm happy to take your questions.
Mr. Secretary General,
start with ZDF, please.
Good morning.
Good morning. Goedemorgen. NATO is also discussing new demands on MCR, minimum capability requirements. Germany seems not to be able to fulfill these demands. How will you deal with that?
Well, don't forget the speech Olaf Scholz gave to the Bundestag, the Zeitenwende speech. Basically the weekend, the Saturday or Sunday after the full onslaught of Russia on Ukraine. Obviously, the whole of the alliance has to work hard to make sure that we meet the targets, that we close the gaps. Now, today, we are absolutely stand ready to defend NATO territory against any threat, but we want to make sure that also in the future we will be there. That will mean work for Germany, the Netherlands, France, the UK, the US. All 32 partners will work very hard to achieve that. But here, the 100 billion pledged by Olaf Scholz was an important moment, I think, in German history. And I really want to applaud him again for that particular moment.
Mr. Secretary General, top of President Zelensky's list is, of course, an invitation to NATO, as it has long been. Do you get the sense that allies are moving in their willingness to grant him this, what he considers is the ultimate security guarantee, short of Article 5?
What we have said in Washington, and of course I will constantly repeat the language, but I think it was significant, the irreversible path to NATO membership. So that means that, yes, in the future NATO will have, as a 32 or 34th member, we will have Ukraine. At the moment, it seems that it will be Ukraine as number 33, but maybe somebody else pops in front of him. But Ukraine will be a member of NATO in the future. That is what we decided in Washington. So the question is then about the timeline. What we are doing now with the pledge, on track, with what we are doing in Wiesbaden, the command. What we are doing is all the bilateral aid going into Ukraine at the moment. All the efforts being coordinated amongst the allies to work on the reconstruction of Ukraine. The fact that we have now JTEC in Poland, which is working on the interoperability of Ukraine with NATO. This collectively, plus all the national security guarantees bilaterally with Ukraine, they collectively constitute a bridge to NATO membership. So then the question is exactly about the when. I cannot answer that now at this moment, but clearly we are working on all these tracks to make sure that indeed one day they will be a member of NATO.
Mr. Secretary General.
Question to ARD, please. Mr. Rutte,
Morning.
What are the points that you're going to focus on this afternoon with Mr. Zelensky regarding the victory plan?
Well, first of all, what we always do is update each other. So I want to hear from him where he is at the moment, how he sees things developing on the Eastern Front with Russia. The situation in Kursk, obviously, this is always on our list. I will update him on the decisions being made in NATO, where we are on, as I mentioned, the pledge and NSETU, but also JTEC and all the other initiatives being rolled out at the moment. And again, stress in my conversation with him that he has to be absolutely assured that 32 allies are united in making sure that collectively we will do whatever is needed to make sure that Ukraine can prevail, that Putin will not get his way.
Okay, Swedish television.
Yes, Mr. Secretary General.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
It was a successful visit yesterday of your Prime Minister.
I saw that.
Yeah.
I saw that. You were supposed to discuss strategy on Russia during the meeting these days. And clearly Russia is no longer to be called a partner of NATO. But what is it then? Is it an adversary? Is it an enemy? Is it a competitor? And why does this matter?
When I had my first NATO summit in Portugal, we had President Medvedev, who was then president. Then, for political reasons, Putin was prime minister. But then President Medvedev in a meeting with NATO and Russia. Those days are far behind, beyond us. So that will not happen in a near or distant future. I'm convinced. So that brings us to the question how to deal with that particular relationship with Russia. And that is a step-by-step approach. It might come up today. It will probably also be discussed when we have the foreign ministers meeting later this year. And this will probably take us right through to summer next year when we have the NATO summit in The Hague. How do we relate to Russia long term? The short term is clear, making sure that Putin does not get his way in Ukraine. But also for the longer term, there are questions to be answered. And as Secretary General, I don't want to preempt that debate, but it is ongoing. And rightly so, because this is a relationship we really have to carve out for the long term.
Okay, over to the gentleman there.
Good morning. Does not have an assessment of how much support Belarus provide to Russia in this war against Ukraine? What kind of assistance it was, and does Belarus continue to provide it?
Well, all evidence is that Belarus, that Minsk, is supporting Russia in the war effort with infrastructure, with territory, and at a cost for your population, for the Belarusian population. I mean, Belarus clearly is not doing this from a position of strength. And that means that it is hurting the country. It's not helping you. And it is helping and supporting Putin in the war effort against Ukraine. And this has got to stop. But obviously that's up to Belarus and the Belarusian politics and people to do that. But at this moment, your country is suffering because of your president providing that support from a position of weakness, can I say.
Okay, we'll take two more questions. Gentleman in white.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Aldin Kulic, Radio Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Yesterday you talked about Russia's influence in the Western Balkans, the risks for secessions in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and KFOR's role. What more should we expect ministers to discuss about stability in the region, especially Bosnia and Herzegovina?
Yes, today, of course, tomorrow when we meet with the 32. So today will be with our partners in the Pacific. Tonight we have President Zelensky visiting. After that we have a meeting of the NATO-Ukraine Council. But tomorrow we will meet with the 32 and there we will very much focus on all other issues. And there's a long list, including, of course, KFOR. And that means that we have to be aware of the tensions on the Western Balkans. The fact that the Pristina-Belgrade dialogue is not moving ahead as we would love to and want to. The EU-facilitated dialogue, which we support, that we are, of course, worried about the secessionist tensions still trying to steer division within Bosnia and Herzegovina society. So that will be no doubt on the agenda, and to make sure that we do everything in our messaging and our concrete support to support the Western Balkans. And therefore I was particularly very glad with the meeting taking place in Berlin earlier this week under the leadership of Chancellor Scholz of the Western Balkan countries, because I know that Germany is particularly working very hard at bringing that group closer to the EU, closer to NATO for those who are not already in NATO, etc.
Okay, thank you. One final question to the gentleman at the back. Can you raise your hand, please?
Johan Andersson, Swedish Radio. What about the situation in Middle East and how does this current situation affects NATO?
Well, obviously, I think all of us here, we are extremely worried about what is happening in the Middle East, in Gaza, Israel, of course, in Lebanon at the moment. Israel is fighting on multiple fronts against Iran and its proxies. It's costing a lot of lives, and that human suffering is paining all of us. And I know in my calls and meetings with allies that they are on an hour-to-hour basis trying to navigate that crisis. NATO obviously is not as an organization involved here. Indirectly, yes, because we have an important mission in Iraq on request of the Iraqi government, helping them to build their military and to improve their capabilities. But obviously this is very much on our mind, but probably not a main issue because of NATO not being part of that region. And as Stoltenberg said before, we cannot solve everything. We really have to concentrate on the Euro-Atlantic realm.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. See you later today, a couple of times. Great.
Thank you.